All right, let's talk about Tyrion. Um, the Tyrion chapter is an odd one because so much happens in it. It's so hectic, and it's this is mainly an effect of what George R. R. Martin kind of set up. And I don't know how George R. R. Martin can possibly uh, end the the Battle of Fire as he's written it. It's just um, he already has five chapters leading into it: Victarion, Tyrion one, Tyrion two, Barristan one, Barristan two, and so so much time is already dedicated to it that I was like, okay, we just need to wrap this thing up. And I understand that we added a Quentin chapter too, but the Quentin chapter doesn't add too much to this. Like the Quentin part is right at the end, but when you think about the things that were set up in the George chapters, I kind of felt that with Tyrion, and I'm happy how Tyrion came out, but I felt like I was stuck in talking about certain things and making certain things happen that needed to happen. Um, and so the main thing was you have to somehow close the Victorian story, which I kind of feel based on Chekhov's Bacon needs to at least hint that a dragon is going to get captured by Victorian. Even if you believe it's with the horn, you need to have the horn action, and you need to have at least a hint that there's a dragon going to be captured. So that needs to happen. And then you have the Tyrion plot which ends with them deciding that they need to rescue the hostages. So the hostage plot has to be in there. And then you also need to wrap up Barristan somehow in the field, who also has elements of the hostages because he talks about the windblown going to get the hostages, and then there's the Dothraki that it's hinted that they need to go get the hostages. So you kind of need the hostage clusterfuck, Barristan's story closed and Victorian's story closed, and somehow get Tyrion to safety when he's in the middle of the battle, with Ironborn on one side and Myrni's army on the other. So it was pretty tough, and so I think we did pretty well. I think we did pretty well. Not to mention when you go through the list of Yunkish masters, the ones that have not been part of the story yet are the perfumed hero and the charioteer and things like this. So, like, just bringing together the elements that were presented from George R. R. Martin that were seeded, I think this is as good as it can be. Like, I don't know how George can do it. I don't know, like, without spending many, many more chapters. Like, I don't think George could resolve it in one chapter. Um, but I don't see how it can be done any better than this, which is if I'm gonna have one criticism of this Tyrion chapter is that there's so much going on and it's not thematically one story. It's a lot of little stories together because it needs to resolve all of these different plot lines. But anyway, let's get into it. Tyrion. All eyes were on the dragon, all noses on the dwarf. Yeah, this line, one of the submissions had this line. I thought it was quite good. We're right in the beginning here, establishing our setting and what's going on, because we need to know that Tyrion's in the middle of battle and what's going on with the perfume and the dragon. We're trying to throw in. There's so many things going on, and they have to kind of all be mentioned. Like, we've got Ironborn, we've got dragons, we've got slave soldiers, we have Barristan, we have the Second Sons. So that was wrong. He knew battle should have proper smells, sweat and piss and shit. Tyrion with the Second Sons is very vulgar, so this is a lot of very infantile humor and vulgarity. Even here now, the air should be flavored with the smoke of burning ships, the stink of horseflesh, the rot of corpses. And this here again is establishing smoke of burning ships is Victorian. The stink of horseflesh, where they are now with rotting their horses. The rot of corpses, the battle aspect of it. So and then the stench of fear of that green monster in the sky, the dragons, adding the elements of everything that's here in this battle is getting crammed in here. This is it's so dense. It's so dense. Yet on this ride to the Yunkish camps, the second sons may have well been trotting through a field of roses. So the perfumed hero aspect is coming in here. The perfume was strong and heady, covering all that might have reeked foul. Tyrion Lannister would have pinched his nose shut, but he was short, too good nostrils for that. This paragraph, it was wordsmithed quite a bit. I think, originally this was like Tyrion Lannister thought his half nose would rot off or something from the sweetness and things like that. Originally, I was thinking about there's a line in the Quentin chapter about Volantis being so sweet that it would rot your teeth, and slowly it evolved into this about which I think is pretty. I think it's pretty fun. This idea of like he would have pinched it shut, but he doesn't have any nostrils. I can scarce breathe, dwarf, Bakoko grumbled from up on his filly. You're going to give us away. Take that bloody thing off. I felt that like Bakoko needed some more screen time, considering we're introduced to a certain number of second sons. Bakoko has not really been given anything other than the fact that, he's got a butt boy. That's all we know about him. So I think he needed to have a scene. So this is all just vulgarity. Do you prefer me bound and naked? Despite the ropes around his wrists, Tyrion forced a grin. Is this how you treat your boys? I'd sooner bugger a dead mule. The axeman visor was closed, but Tyrion knew he had made a disgusted face. Besides, you're not naked. You still got that cloak. So we got to bring in where we last left Tyrion. He wanted that breastplate, and we do see like at the end of the Barristan story, he meets a Myronese noble, a Yunkish noble with a fancy breastplate, and so we're just kind of making him the same guy that this is, and he liked the breastplate. Tyrion sees the breastplate, so it seems like it's the same noble from the end of the Barristan story. So it seems like it would be somebody, maybe the perfumed hero, because if he's so into beautiful ornamental armor, maybe he'd also be very into like having beautiful smells around him, things like this. Besides, you're not naked, you got that cloak. This threadbare thing, how perilous to be your plaything. Do they all die unclad in the field? I was really thinking about how are they going to rescue these hostages, and it's funny because like Tyrion in this is like, oh, this is a horrible plan, but this is actually the best plan that the writers can come up with. Like, how does one rescue a bunch of hostages? Well, I guess you come up with a scheme to ask for them. So this is their scheme, and we have to establish that he's hiding. He's pretending to be a prisoner, and he's hiding everything. And so then this idea of Tyrion's in ropes, and he's with Bakoko, and so he's going to be dirty about being bound and being his lover and things like this. So then he's like, what are you saying? I've never lost a lover in battle. Now this is kind of funny because the other men around in the Second Sons are not like homophobic. Like they're just like he's just one of them. Tyrion's the one that's making all the gay jokes. And so that's quite intentional, that like Tyrion is from a more conservative environment than this environment of being, sellswords in Essos. And so the Kemp says, what about Rudder? What about Dornish John? Rudder just means a rut is when animals get in heat. And so Rudder is just like, they're calling him like, just, his nickname was just fucker, and Dornish John, that's kind of there's a Dornish Gerald. And so it's like, why not Dornish John? And then the next, we've got a lot of Johns in this story right now. We're making a big joke about John confusion. So here's Dornish John. And then here we get this joke here, nothing. Rudder and John are running with the Ragged Standard. The Ragged Standard is just another sellsword company. It was formed by Bittersteel before the Golden Company. Not what I heard, said Snatch. They say dead men sing no songs. This is a line. George R. R. Martin has a short story collection called "The Songs Dead Men Sing," and they say "Dead Men Sing No Songs" is a from the prologue of A Game of Thrones. So Tyrion says that they say "Dead men sing no songs." No doubt, dead arses sing even fewer. This idea of singing asses, yeah, just being ridiculously like bottom of the barrel humor. Believe what tale suits you. What suits me is armor. And every line with Tyrion has to be clever, right? While a stray cock would be a nuisance, a stray arrow would prove a form of lethal buggering. Why do you think I chose a breastplate that goes to my knees? And that was just kind of thinking realistically, like if the breastplate it fits. The breastplate shouldn't fit, so it's like it doesn't fit actually. But he still has it. But the noble's breastplate didn't actually descend that low, but it was still enough to chafe him. The metal knocked in his upper thighs. Come the morrow, if he survived, he would have blackened mark on each thighs, like a bruised apple eye, but better a bruised apple than a wormy one. Just this idea that when you're dead, you're gonna have worms in you as a corpse. So you'd rather be a bruised apple than a wormy apple. It was a step up from the ruined chainmail he abandoned anyway. We hear about his ruined chainmail. It looks moth-eaten at the end of the Dance with Dragons. This armor might even stop a sword, and it was beautiful to boot, a scene of passion between men and women, harpies inlaid in jet and jade and mother of pearl. That information is from the end of the Barristan chapter, so linking the two would have been crime to leave it behind. Only after Tyrion had donned it had he learned the owner's identity, a Yunkish noble the sellswords mocked as the perfume hero. Yes, as I say, he's the one Yunkish. He's the Yunkish, the perfumed hero, and the charioteer are the ones that the Yunkish nobles that haven't been mentioned yet in the story yet. They're in the appendix, so I felt like they needed to be in here. And it was ripe with the man. Mormont slew her, but the ghost lingers in the air, a haunting from beyond the grave. This idea of like perfume being a ghost is brought up by Qyburn in A Feast for Crows. So Tyrion is making the same sort of connection that the perfumed hero's ghost is with them from beyond the grave, and then or the latrine later. Later we find out why he's saying that beyond the grave, because his body was dumped in the latrine, and so he's. But we learn that later. I can't smell anything, Brown Ben said sternly. The captain of the Second Sons rode 3 lengths ahead of him, his helm faced towards the dragon. Got to keep reminding people that the dragon is like there and on people's minds, so you don't forget about it, because they're not forgetting about it. Silk cloak billowing, he looked almost lordly, or at least knightly. This is this idea that he's supposed to become a lord if he makes it back to Westeros. And so him saying, or at least knightly, it's also a little joke like, oh, maybe I'm just going to make him a landed knight. I didn't actually, is he actually going to be a lord, or, I'm supposed to give him a castle, but whatever. Not that it matters one bit. As it happens, the Beastmaster lost a nephew at Daznax. He'll be hard on the scent of vengeance, not perfume. Yeah, a lot of people died at Daznax. We know that some lords and family members died. And this idea that maybe the nephew is because the Beastmaster's brother is quite a bit of a character, that maybe this is actually the Beastmaster's brother's child. So when we meet the Beastmaster's brother, he's very sympathetic to the idea of taking the hostages and launching them, and the idea being that it's his son that died. Here it's revealed. Of course, Brown Ben Plum never says the word of, it's always O. So that's the trestle this shaky table rests on. Vengeance, blood for blood. This is bringing back the blood for blood from the Quentyn story and things like this. That this is the way of Slaver's Bay, blood for blood. Truth be told, Tyrion thought this whole scheme a bad one. It is a crazy one, but how else are you going to rescue these hostages? And he cursed his wits for failing to hatch something else. It's a little meta there. The Second Sons needed the dragon's queen as hostage of proof of their loyalty, or so he had convinced the sellswords. This is from the sample chapters. But how would he actually go about the rescue? Kem suggested they ride hard and fast and take the Yunkish camp while they lunched. Quite a few people were like, "Wait, did they use the word lunch?" And I was like, "Yes, they use the word lunch as a verb in a Game of Thrones." So I thought about bringing it back here. That they that we don't actually uh, tell people what time it is, but the idea is that it's somewhere around noon. In the story, we don't want to be too specific because then people start poking holes and inconsistencies. But that was a meal that Brown Ben couldn't stomach. Everything has to be a little bit clever, right? Um, it might cost them half the company and leave them dead hostages besides. We're getting here that Brown Ben is um, very timid and very conservative. And the idea is that Brown Ben only cares about his own skin, but here we're getting elements that he actually cares about his company, which is something that comes in later when Tyrion decides not to snitch on them. That Brown Ben actually cares for these people. These are his family. Alan favored stealth. A group could scale the walls, find the men, and sneak out with slavers even knowing. This was a little bit of like thinking about Theon. But this is also bringing this up because Kem wanted to take the camp by force, which is what the Windblown are doing. And then Alan favors stealth, which is actually what the Dothraki do. They sneak in by stealth. They do a little more, but this is the idea that they're thinking of ideas on how to steal the hostages, right? And they're coming up with ideas because we know that there's three different groups trying to steal the hostages that have been mentioned by George. And so one is going to try to take them by force, Windblown. The other is trying to try to take them by stealth, the Dothraki. And so they opt for a gentler plan. They're just going to go up and ask for the hostages. So comedy ensues as these three groups try to get the hostages at the same time. Um, and we did have this plan was put forward in our recreation of Tyrion 1 with Caspario mentioning it. Like, what are we going to do? Ask for it? That's ridiculous. May the gods have mercy on fools. So the company rode through the Yunkish caps with willful leisure. Yeah, I love finding that term, willful leisure, as battle raged east and west. And then we just get kind of some George-like descriptions. Sir Garibald trotted out in front, bearing the company's banner. Brown Ben Plum with his hastily sewn dragon banner in the saddlebag. This is when he was going to yield. He's flanked by Casporian Inkpots. They're the second, and we know the importance because of Tyrion's notes. So we know that Casporian Inkpots are the second in command levels, and then the sergeant. Then behind them is the sergeants, then his sergeants, with the rest of the 500 second sons in tow. It's actually very hard to imagine 500 people on horses, right? It's so you just kind of say, oh, they're there. All were mounted save for Tyrion, Penny, and Mormont, their wrists tied loosely with hempen rope. They were escaped slaves after all, and they would need to play their part. That was the other thing that was very difficult to come up with when we're talking about what other plan would work. Because Penny, it's one thing to throw Tyrion on a horse, but Penny also on a horse, like Penny's not a soldier in any respect. And how are we getting her from place to place? Is she just going to be she can't run very much because she's, and she can't really ride. So like this is also why the charioteer becomes like a very useful strategy to get them to somewhere safe is that we can actually have a character like Penny who's pretty immobile move. The wrist tied okay. The dwarf's leash was tethered to Bacoco's, Penny's to Alan's, Sir Jorah's to Snatches, prisoners to lumped in with the queen hostages, or so run their story, all condemned to execution if they weren't slain first. This was a battlefield, and their roles did not grant them helms, but Plum had at least allowed them armor beneath their mummers' cloaks. Originally, there was a lot about Plum begrudging it, but the rhythm of it took it out, and then I took it out, and then I was like, yeah, let's have Plum be a little more caring here and wanting to save people's lives. Snatch coughed. Should have bathed you in horse piss, pig shit, cow's blood, something. So this gets into something about what is the direwolf smelling. So Tyrion is thinking about perfume and fear and maybe, but also like in the tent he gets covered in blood. So he's covered in all sorts of things that would make a wolf smell him and want to go after him. He's doused in blood and perfume and fear. So the idea is that here he's getting covered in cow's blood. Um, he's going to have a different scent, but this is what this line is about, foreshadowing of him being covered in blood. Mayhaps the Beastmaster will keel over when he gets a whiff. He'll keep far back when we speak to him. How far can the man smell anyway? So this is just kind of dismissing this idea that Tyrion smells so much. When you fart, I can smell clear across camp, Snatch retorted. A quip came to Tyrion. That's not a fart you smell, but rather, and I have no, if in case you're wondering, do I know what Tyrion's quip was? No, I have no idea what Tyrion's quip would be. It's a really good joke that we'll never hear because of Victarion's horns. So this was a really fantastic joke, and we can blame Victarion. It's Victarion's fault that we'll never know Tyrion's joke here. So this then goes to this description and these paragraphs. This is mirroring Aaron's experience with the horn, with the same horn and it being blown in the Drowned Man chapter. A lot of the descriptions are similar, how it's paced and things like this. But it is this is the whole RE and everything here. So as sharp and sudden as you can go back to Aaron and compare the language. There's a lot of similarities in how things are paced and how things are arranged. As sharp and sudden as a headsman acts, the sound of the horn fell upon them. RE, bold and woeful was its blast, a wail that made Tyrion's teeth rattle in his mouth. The noise seemed to lay upon all and sundry like one great funeral shroud. All and sundry is a George R. It's not just George R. Martin. It's a saying. Oh, for everybody is for all and sundry. But George uses it maybe 4 or 5 times or something in the series. All and sundry. Ari, the men cast searching looks off to the bay. Where was its source? The ships, the armies on the shore. Was it from the Yunkish or the Ironmen? This is not just like where the horn is. We're still establishing setting here. Also, I think one of the searching looks off towards the bay. One of the something to think about when you're reading. One of the editors pointed out that looking to and looking toward are used differently by George R. Martin. Like he always uses looking to as in when you look to someone for advice or you look to someone for their approval, and he blends and conflates it intentionally with looking towards someone. But if there's none of that second meaning, it's always going to be looking towards. So like, for instance, here, everyone was, I think it was before, it was like everyone had searching looks off to the bay, but it's like, no, because they're not looking to the bay for anything. They're looking towards the bay, this kind of thing. So this very specific differentiation between to and toward, looking to something and looking towards something that George R. Martin makes. And here I get, this is a super dark paragraph. The sound was despair, a scream so noxious it filled the air with fumes, stinging his eyes. Tyrion Lannister closed his and waited for the blower to exhaust his breath. Yet the note sustained itself on and on. It was a horn of pain and regret, sorrow. And then we get the what's going to be the 3 most painful things in Tyrion's life. And so it took the 3 most painful things in Tyrion's life, which would be, the death of his mother and her not being in his life, his father's cruelty to him, and his father's death, which is encompassed on the toilet scene and Taisha. So we have these three. We're getting very dark with this horn. The wail of his mother as she lay dying in a bed of blood. Keep in mind, Tyrion, she dies birthing Tyrion. Tyrion kills her, right? The voice of his father chiding him, "You are son, no son of mine." That's right before he kills his father, right? Um, the whimper of his wife as the fifth guard took her by the neck and entered her. Another, all of this, like these painful memories for Tyrion, the darkest memories right there, all connected to the horn. Just when Tyrion felt his ear trapped in a nightmare forever, the sound finally ceased. For the briefest moment, there's quiet, eerie quiet, before the clamor of battle returned to the air. The clang of steel, the crash of hulls, the call of dragons. Some nice alliteration there. Then a chunk thump, and we're bringing back. There's so many things, right? Because now we got to bring back the sisters, right? So before it was, there was, we decided to do, one of the editors suggested a little fun conflation here where he says, "What madness was that?" Harpy's daughter, Brown Ben said, playing their game from before. I meant so before, I think originally the chunk thump goes and a land says Harpy's daughter. And it deflates everything with a comic relief kind of ending here with it that way. But it was shifted around because now the Harpy's daughter isn't really comic relief right now. It's like Harpy's daughter. And then it's like, I meant that. I know what you mean. And he gets really angry. And so it keeps the darkness to it. And then we come in we're not bringing down the walls of Marine to, with some horn. No, we keep moving. So the keep moving came in. Originally, this wasn't the ending that we had. It was going to be a more dark ending where Tyrion kind of leaves everybody, deciding that, he just needed to outrun the slowest person. But it got shifted around. I was convinced because someone was like, "Look, yeah, the bear joke, the camping bear joke, like it's fine, but it's not really that funny." Like you don't want to just like end your chapter on a joke that's like, that some people might have heard and do something else. And I was like, okay. So the keep moving is back here. And so felt like Uncle Garyon and I don't know, they came up with the tumbling and Uncle Garyon and things like this. And so kind of seeding it here, the keep moving imp. A lot of editors were like, would Uncle Garyon really call him imp? Yes. He, if you go to the flashbacks of Uncle Gary lines, he calls Tyrion imp. Back when he's called, in A Storm of Swords, he's called Uncle Gary. But yeah, he's called Imp. Uncle Gary calls him Imp. So they kept moving from one towering sister to another, from Wicked Sister to Harridan. It was the Harridan they neared, a trebuchet as familiar as calamity. Yezin's compound was close by, and Tyrion had no desire to return to its shadow. The plan was not to go back far, but only to the Beastmaster's camp. But things always go awry, don't they? Before this day was through, he could very well be launched to the air himself. Yeah, this is about like this got edited quite a bit. I think there's some ideas of like, when they're heading back, where they're logically gonna be. Are they gonna pass Yezin's camp? Isn't that gonna cause troubles? Are they gonna take a different path? What can they see? I felt it was a little too in the weeds to go in too much detail, but what stuck is that he just remembers that, Yezin's camp should be a little bit further than the Beastmaster's camp, and then we don't have to deal with the people spotting him. He tried to take his mind off the dim prospects by reading. Now, this entire paragraph, which is, a lot about atmosphere, but it exists. The Lord Wobblecheeks exists in order to contrast with the charioteer, because we have to introduce the charioteer. And if you just introduce the charioteer, like, they passed the charioteer's camp, it's like, what a coincidence that the one camp you talk about has a chariot. So it's like, okay, well, we have to talk about at least one other camp. So he's taking his mind off reading, so he's going to read camps like he does a book. Um, and over time, this became more and more poetic. He had no book to hand, but Tyrion saw each camp they passed as a page written wood, dirt, and canvas. The camp's size, defenses, and the matter of arrangements all bespoke its owner aptitude, its taste, his ability to lead. The most impressive by far was Gazdor's O'Alak. And it's true that Lord Wobblecheeks is specifically talked about being the kind of best of the youngish lords. Tyrion runs into the loyal slave at the end of A Dance with Dragons. Neat circles of golden tents ringed by sharpened stakes of blackened olive wood in a deep ditch. The blackened olive wood is because when the Yunkish came in, they burned all of the olive groves. Or no, I'm sorry, not the great masters burned the olive groves on their retreat when Dany came in. But nonetheless, that's why they have blackened olive wood. It's from the burned olive groves in a deep ditch. There's a lot of this discussion if you go back to other chapters talking about camps, about the palisades of sharpened stakes and ditches. This comes up quite a bit in George R. Martin's writing. The camp was prodigious, regal, even ostentatious, and imagine Lord Wobblecheeks was much the same. The banner of House Alak was in proud display above a massive silken pavilion. Though it seemed himself was gone. The idea is that he's a good wise master, so he's actually fighting the Ironborn, leading his soldiers to face the Ironborn. The remaining guards could still be seen going about their business as if the battle wasn't raging, well-fed, well-armed, and possibly attentive, his loyal subjects, Tyrion mused, as true-hearted as Westermen. So yeah, much of a rehash of the end of A Dance with Dragons. The next encampment lay in stark contrast, but like I say, all of that was just so that we could talk about this more important one because we need to have the chariot. The next encampment lay in stark contrast to the former. Its canvas tents were faded, chaotically pitched, with more than a few listing to one side. Half the chattel appeared sickly, the other half starved. All stood idle, staring at the dragon over the water. Again, keep bringing back the dragon. You got to keep talking about the dragon. The dragon's there. In their carelessness, the camp had no ditches, no stakes. It was clear view. Tyrion couldn't find a single flag flapping. If the Lannister men had pitched a tent, his father would have had them gelded, though he supposed a rooster could not be made a capon twice. A capon is a rooster who's neutered. That's what a capon is. So a rooster can't be made a capon twice. Still, banner or no, it was abundantly clear whose camp this was. The charioteers. There it stood on an earthen ramp at the encampment's center, the wise master's only point of pride. The great bronze chariot was in the style of the old empire, exquisitely wrought carriage. Tyrion could only squint as the sun gleamed off rows of embossed harpies and sphinxes. Its spoked wheels were ebony and iron, and protruding from each was a twisted scythe, 5 feet long and razor sharp. And here we got, I think this is from Trey the Explainer sent me a very history-focused description. I mean, it was edited some, but the idea was that, like, why were chariots used? Well, it's because the world hadn't invented stirrups yet, and so it was a fun little thing to add here. That once the stirrup came, the chariot disappeared, and so as radiant as because you don't hear about chariots in Westeros except for maybe some bone chariots north of the wall or something. They're not used anymore. Well, why did chariots disappear? Well, it's because the stirrup was invented. As radiant as the chariot was, it was no more than a relic of bygone age. Kings and darks of old Gis might have ridden to war, spinning blades, lopping off heads of arms as they went. This is very Egyptian. Egyptian carvings have these massive chariots, like just bowling over and chopping up people in pictures. But that would have been 5,000 years ago. After the Dothraki gifted the world the stirrup, cavalry proved much more maneuverable, and chariots all but vanished from battlefields. And so then we get the discussion of the Zamatari. Zamatar is, I think it's just from the World of Ice and Fire. It's a small city on the north coast of of Sotheros. And it turns out there was a special breed of horses that originally came from North Africa. I think, is that where the Arabian horse? Um, if the Arabian horse breed originally comes from the North Africa, they claim no, maybe it's a different one. There was one. There's like a special chariot horse, I think, that came from North Africa, or like originally, and so um, this is why the Zamatari come from the north coast of Sotheros, and um, it turns out these purebred horses do have massive genetic issues. But of course, when we're talking about these purebred horses, we're talking also about like what's going on with Targaryens, all right, and inbreeding and stuff like that, or if you will, Lannisters. At its front, a four-horse team of white stallions. I mean, this whole thing, white stallions, like stamped the ground where they stood, almost begging for a lash to spur them into the fray. Zamatari, Tyrion noted. It was a famed breed originally from the north coast of Sotheros. Swift, sure-footed, rare. So few left that purebreds were the sight as scarce as, well, perhaps a dragon. The horse's seed was more valuable than rubies, most often only serving to produce mongrels. When two Zamatari were made to mate, the offspring usually came out weak, feeble, monstrous. This is a little bit of egret in there, talking when she talks about Craster. But why aren't, the Targaryens should be weak, feeble, monstrous, inbred, right? And so this idea of like, why is Dany healthy or seemingly healthy is an issue. And yet the wise master had 4 healthy steeds. So yeah, I mean, the amount of incest that George R. R. Martin puts in the story, there's no way that like, not just the Targaryens, but I'm talking Jaime and Cersei. There's no way they would have like three kids. That would be even like functional. like it's it's really quite weird, and especially like you take another issue like Craster and stuff like that, like none of those kids would be functional. So it's not, some people make the argument, well, maybe the Targaryens are genetically different, but it's not just the Targaryens. Craster is doing this incest stuff. Jaime and Cersei are doing this incest stuff. Human beings can't do brother and sister and produce like viable, like working offspring. It just doesn't work that way. Some people bring up, oh, but mice, I mean, mice can inbreed brother to sister. And there's a reason. They have litters of like 15 at a time, and then have multiple litters like every month, like it's just, I don't know, every month, but they have, I think I read that a rat can have like, over 300 kids in its lifetime or whatever. And you're like, of course you're going to have ones that survive when you're having 300. Human beings don't work that way. So, it's completely fantastical that there's this much incest in A Song of Ice and Fire. But even though that's recognized, like, even though it's odd because it's there, but at the same time, like, Ygritte recognizes that incest produces really bad situations, like monstrous offspring. So it's a contradiction, but we're just kind of addressing this again and maybe lampshading it as Ygritte does. But anyway, Tyrion really can't be amazed at anything because already this environment is so absurd. Ironmen, flying corpses, dragons. It's an absurd environment, and the story is only getting more absurd, right? It's funny because I think I got a message, somebody from some post was like really a direwolf chasing after a chariot, like this is ridiculous. And you're like, it's already a ridiculous environment, like it's already up to 11, like huge, these huge trebuchets like throwing clutches of dead bodies while dragons are flying around, and like slave soldiers on stilts and buck naked pit fighters, like, and all of this like chaos. Like everything is nuts right now. So you can't all of a sudden like back it off and be like, oh well, let's be reasonable here. No, like this is, we're already in an extreme environment. Like, you know, them riding a chariot away from a dire wolf is par for the course. Perhaps it's time for me to die, Tyrion thought. And this is, nothing in life can surprise me, not anymore. And this is a little bit of winking, like that we're going to see a lot of ridiculousness coming up. Nothing can surprise him. Yet within minutes, Tyrion Lannister's jaw dropped once more. What's that? Penny asked. A madman's flaunt, a show. What a vivid show it was. Mixed in with the palisades of sharpened stakes, the Beastmaster had an assortment of iron cages, some stacked 10 feet high. Originally, this came from a submission where, in the submission, it was that the camp was surrounded by cages, and they used it instead of stakes. But in the end, I was like, that's far too many cages. Nobody can have possibly that many cages. So what we can do is like mix in the cages with the palisade of sharpened stakes. Like it's a really cool idea to use the cages, but you can't have that many cages. That's like insane number of cages, especially if they're 10 feet high. Near the entrance of the camp, they had been turned out to display a taste of his curiosity. Birds, hundreds of birds, vibrant to the one. A sunrise. This idea, this is kind of bringing back the wall of birds from Arion 3 when she goes up to the top of Storm's End, and they have the wall of ravens. You know, a sunrise. They're arranged by color for all to see. Each bird a brushstroke and a great living painting of feathers. There were parrots from the summer islands that were blood red, ducks as orange as spring carrots, warblers to form the yellow sun. It was clear to Tyrion why, of all the wise masters and their allies, the Beastmaster had been chosen to house the Queen's hostage, the 3 hostages. Yeah, and this is just one of those logical things. I was like, okay, the last 2 wise masters that have not been mentioned in the story are the Beastmaster and the Charioteer. The Charioteer is perfect to get these characters who can't move very easily, like Penny and Tyrion, out and to safety, a chariot. That's great. That's perfect. The Beastmaster is perfect for, hey, he's going to be the person keeping the hostages. And then we have this interesting environment of all these animals, which eventually led to this idea, well, if you've got all these animals, why doesn't he have a direwolf? So, okay, yeah. And so this is where this kind of the genesis of all of this. Where better than a menagerie? If the cages could hold the world's most violent beasts, there's no doubt it could hold a man. And the keepers would be well versed in preventing escape. And what's a worse humiliation than being kept amongst the squalor of beasts? So, kind of just explaining it. And so here we get into the character of the Beastmaster's brother. A sentry atop the tower sighted them and gave a signal. A dozen guards raced to fill the entrance of the camp. Soon the sentry was joined up there by a sergeant, a homely man with sad eyes, thin-haired, lacquered into short horns. His idea is the exact opposite of his brother. He has these short, thinning hair. His brother has thick, wonderful hair. He's homely, sad eyes. His brother is... And this is kind of this idea that this guy is like Tyrion, because Jaime Lannister is the exact opposite of Tyrion, right? And so this idea is that Tyrion is seeing a kindred spirit up there. Brown Ben Plum opened his visor. Would have words with Ishak Zo Malgaz. Just made up the name. Some call him the Beastmaster, I hear. Men, we just give him some personality here, that he's bitter. I'm the Beastmaster Beast. So this is from one of the this idea came from one of the submissions that, like, you know, that he's this completely, you know, whiny, bitter guy who's not dissimilar from Tyrion. He does all the work. I train them, I feed them, I tend to their ails and sorrows. When the menagerie was wanting new wonders, I travel far and wide and dicker for such creatures. The bitterness dripping from the man's words made Tyrion smile. A second son. He should join us. The man you seek is my elder brother. So this is the idea that, you know, he's like Tyrion. And so Tyrion immediately is like, oh, yeah, I like this guy. So Very well, your brother, if he's here, tell him the Supreme Commander Morgar sent us. Brown Ben told him, Morgar's our Zerzan doesn't command today. This is the bringing back the command confusion from um, from Tyrion 2 that George put in there. Plum shrugged. That's what I told him. Man ordered me anyway, he did. Should I have refused him? Ninkishman raised his brow. The masters and the council play their secret songs. The rest of us can only dance in silence. Yeah, I thought that was a beautiful little line. Very well. What message do we have for my brother? We're to take the hostages for execution. This is their plan. These three escaped slaves we've caught, property of the Yell. He says the Yell. He's about to say yellow whale, but he says the property of the late Yell, the noble Yezin Zokagas. Morgar bids us tie us our three with their three and have the Harridan deliver them to Marine. Then we get this little acting. Tyrion went to his knees, tossing up pleading hands. Penny, the mummer she was, managed to tremble. Mormont simply stood there. Still the damn bear won't dance. Yeah, and I like that. The only thing is that we use dance twice really close to each other, which is too bad. Though I like both lines independently. Because Mormont is the bear, he's the dancing bear. Though in A Dance with Dragons, Tyrion already makes a few jokes about the dancing bear. And he says, launch them for the trebuchet. The slave returned to the Harridan. The sister stood idle for the nonce. That would be sweet. Yeah, and this idea is that his son is the one that died at Daznax. Praz, fetch my brother. While they waited, Tyrion peered through the guard's legs to catch a glimpse of the exotic creatures within the camp. Staring back glumly from one cage was a queer bear with mismatched fur, half black as jet, half white as snow. Obviously a panda, and something they wouldn't have in Westeros. Over on the left side were herons with bright pink feathers. These are the flamingos, but of course they're like the herons from the Barristan chapter. And besides them, a shaggy camel with two humps instead of one. Asian camel, one that you'd find in Mongolia. A guard moved, and now over one far side of camp, you could see it can't be. And so here we get into the undoing the ridiculousness that I think almost all fans hate is the illogic of Joffrey sending the cat spa. And so we undo it here, or at least undo Tyrion thinking that it would be him, Yet there it was in the cage, salt and pepper fur, ragged and wild. It's not the first time seeing one. And this is the thing, is we actually haven't had a full-sized, I guess there's Mama Direwolf who died with her pups, but there's the dead direwolf. We haven't had a living direwolf. Was one mentioned by Varamir Sixskins maybe? But the idea is that, a full-sized direwolf is going to be here. Stark children had a whole damn litter, but he spent a moon's term with Jon Snow. He had never been far off. Tyrion thought them large at the time. Now he could see that they were mere pups. The bastards knew, they killed him once, the others too. And it's true. All direwolves hate Tyrion. They hate me, all of them. And this one is no exception. So all the direwolves hate Tyrion. The direwolf's ears pricked up. And the idea is, does he smell the perfume? Is it the perfume? Tyrion decided he hated them too, every last one. It was thanks to a bloody direwolf that he was here. This is bitter, edgy Tyrion here. Send a dog to kill a wolf, Joff had said. And this is getting into the incorrect memory that Tyrion has in A Storm of Swords. In A Storm of Swords, he remembers send a dog to kill a wolf, but in A Game of Thrones, it's send a dog to kill a dog. So he makes the conclusion that Joff sent the cat's paw based on that line, even though the line is wrong. So this is why it's like bringing this to undo it, 1,000 years ago in a courtyard in Winterfell, that had started this whole mess, hadn't it? Along with a certain dagger of Valyrian steel. His abduction by Lady Catelyn followed, then his father's shame, then a war. One thing, I had just a couple weeks ago, did another discussion on people hating Cat, and they always bring up Cat and her abduction of Tyrion as this thing that started the war. But you forget that, like, it only starts the war because Tywin is an unreasonable human being, right? Like, he attacks because he doesn't want to be shamed, not caring about the fate of Tyrion. Because normally, if you have a hostage, you don't do anything for fear that they'll kill them. But Tywin didn't care. So, in a sense, like, Catelyn kidnapping Tyrion shouldn't have started the war. It should have been a ward, a hostage that would have been useful. But because Tywin is psychotic, it had the opposite reaction. So in many ways, like, you can't even blame the abduction of Tyrion as something to start the war, because how would Catelyn know that Tywin was psychotic? But anyway, that's all that's in there, is his father's shame, then the war. After a skin of strong wine, a crown was put on Joffrey's head while Ned Stark lost his own, and his new wife had her vengeance and left him with dowry and regicide. Again, all of this has to be a little clever. A dowry of, dowry of regicide and exile. If Sandor Clegane if only Sandor had killed him, like the little shit wanted. Now, originally, this line was if only Sandor had killed, like, the thing, the beast, like the little shit wanted, and then he would have remembered that originally the order was to kill the direwolf, and then that would make him remember that it was not Bran. But then it's like, oh wait, he's realizing it later though. So should the first mention be Bran? And so should he say, if only Sandor had killed the boy, like the little shit wanted, and then realizing it later that it was the wolf? Like, there's confusion. And I realize it doesn't kind of work either way. Like, Tyrion wouldn't be cruel enough to be like, oh, if only he killed Bran. That just doesn't sound like Tyrion. But, it is true to be like, to suddenly know that it's about the wolf, then forget it, and then know it's about the wolf again. So it's like, it had to be ambiguous here. So we use just a him. So the him, we don't know if we're talking about Bran or the direwolf here, even though, sometimes they use it but it's ambiguous here so that in the situation, the confusion, it's enhancing the confusion that Tyrion is having over this experience, the send a dog to kill a wolf. Anyway, the old wolf howled, was great and call, old and sickly. The idea is that this wolf should have been mercy killed as well, like Bran, right? Like the mercy thing. The Manji thing was, I'm not saying Bran should be mercy killed, but the characters in the story do. The Manji thing was no doubt in pain. If it were a horse and ox, it would have been put down long ago. That brings him back to thinking about that. Send a dog to kill a wolf, he murmured, this time aloud. As soon as he said it, though, it was wrong. No, the prince had said send a dog to kill a dog. It was the Stark boy's pet that disturbed Joffrey, he suddenly recalled. The way it howled day and night, hadn't even praised Bran for his silent misery. But if not Joffrey, who? And this is all very... Now, next we're coming up with a very logical kind of thing. Based on the evidence here, okay? What would Tyrion think? Because at that breakfast, Jaime says it would be a mercy. And the person that we all thought, sent the cat's paw was Jaime and Cersei through a Game of Thrones. It's not until it's undone in a Clash of Kings that you kind of go, what? So shouldn't he be on this? Like, and the only reason he thinks it's not Jaime is because he thinks so highly of Jaime. Jaime wouldn't send somebody else to do his killing, that kind of thing. And so, but now he doesn't think highly of Jaime. So he should be on this logic train, right? The answer came easy. It would be a mercy. He had said it so casually over breakfast, but that was a lie. Mercy had nothing to do with it. Keep in mind that at that breakfast, he already suspects his siblings of throwing Bran from the tower. Like, that's very clear in that first chapter of the first Tyrion chapter of A Game of Thrones. The only thing, weirdly, Tyrion never thinks about it in his internal monologue. Like, oh, it's really fucked up that my brother threw a little boy from a tower. Like, he never thinks about that, but like his actions are definitely like, oh, I suspect you guys. Like, oh, I suspect you guys of throwing that boy from a tower. And he definitely knew about the incest. That's revealed in A Clash of Kings that Tyrion has always known about the incest. His brother wanted the dead boy dead because of what he'd seen. That's why he'd thrown him from the tower in the first place, wasn't it? Of course, the cat's paw was his. And it's kind of the logical conclusion that you'd come to if you were Tyrion. Why had he ever thought him innocent? Because he might be too proud to let another man do his killing? No, Jaime wasn't proud. He was craven. He was the most craven man Tyrion had ever known. And this gets dark. Yeah, after all, when it mattered most of all, he couldn't even tell his father no. And this is again also getting into this idea that like Jaime is old when he caves to his father. He's a Kingsguard and he's old. He's like 19 or 20, and still he like caves and is like, okay, daddy, all right, I'll let you do the Taisha thing where I tell Tyrion that she was a sex worker and let her get gang raped, like, so, and I understand that like when George R. R. Martin originally wrote that story, he wasn't thinking about the ages very much. And so you kind of imagine them both being kids, but once you kind of get the ages and you're like, oh no, he was an adult. That kind of needs to be fixed, and this is saying like, oh wow, Jaime was a fucking absolute coward in that situation. So all of this is, it's a lot of like trying to fix little errors here and there and make the story fit together. Brown Ben's voice cut through Tyrion's thoughts. What of the battle, my lord? And here, we've got to wrap up Barristan. So the youngish men looked over to the bay where the dragon circled. Bring back the dragon. The dragon's constantly being mentioned, if you notice here. The dragon's always in their mind. The Sunset Corsairs are landing more men. The savage bloodlust knows no end. But it's not all hard news. The sortie from the western gate has been routed. The cats broke them near the Harpy's daughter. They're retreating back to the gate now, or half of them are at least. The rest headed to the bay, towards the Bloody Horn, I think. Perhaps they mean to escape by sea. And I know a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, like, wait, like, where's Barristan? And the thing is, we don't know. We don't know if he's retreating back to the gate or if he's heading to the sea. We know what happens to people at the gate, Is he getting hit by a big rock, So Barristan's fate's a mystery at this point. But Barristan's story with regards to the Battle of Fire is over. Barristan the Bold failed. Could it be true? Far across the narrow sea, men still recited the turdies he'd won. Little boys cried his name as they collect wooden swords together. How could a man like there fall out here at the ends of the earth amid shit and mud and fools? Is this how heroes died? Little meta there. Yeah, I know. Is this really the end of Barristan's story? Because Barristan also thinks about, is this the end of my story? And what of the plan? Who will the second sons yield to now, if not the White Knight? The ropes around Tyrion's wrist suddenly felt tighter. Will that purple cloak turn? He looked over to Plum. See, now he's looking to Plum rather than looking towards Plum. His face revealed nothing. What of the wind blown? The old sellsword asked, his voice calm, very calm. We heard they'd gone over. And this is also kind of a big joke here, is that Plum was supposedly a bad Syvas player, where Tyrion was like reading his face. And here, though, when it comes to being the game that matters, Plum has a better poker face. And all of a sudden, Tyrion is at a disadvantage. I mean, keep in mind that, like, this is Plum's game. This is his vocation. This is his life. He's a sellsword who keeps himself alive. And he's very good at it. And that's this idea that, I can compare Syvas to war. Plum is so bad at war. No, Plum's good at this. So he's poker faced here. Just so. They shall share a carnal pit with the Corsairs and the Silver Queen. The Englishmen's face hardened. The blood of the noble Gorjak, so Eraz, reddens their blades. That was Pudding Face, who got killed in Tyrion 2. Lady Malazza 2, we had the girl general here die. Her camp stormed, an hour passed. She and all her slaves put to the sword. They tried to do the same to us twice, but we drove them back. The hostages. So now we're getting the wind blown in the story, because we know that we've got 3 parties going for the hostages. We need to have them all enter the story somehow, so the windblown are here. Oh gosh, so... And here we make that connection. They want to snitch the same purse, only Chem's way. Well, who's going to do it Alan's way? This is the whole thing. Like, we set up that there's 3 ways to take the hostages: by force, by stealth, and by asking for them, right? And so they're Second Sons are asking. Windblown is trying to take it by force. Who's trying to take it by stealth? This is what's been set up. These new rivals were unwelcome. The Windblown had 4 times their numbers and ruthless repute. It's true. There's 2,000 of them. Even if the Second Sons got their hands on the Queen's 3, now they have to worry about the Windblown. So the Windblown coming into the story. Where's Arch and Drink? The direwolf howled again, rocking the cage. It smells me, my perfume or my fear. You must excuse me. My wolf needs me. And it's also bringing back like the beginning of the chapter, being like, oh, this everywhere place should smell fear. Well, there is some smell of fear here. Once the Beastmaster's brother was gone, Casperio cursed. Stupid old man. Has he learned nothing from his century on Earth? He spoke the common tongue, a prudent choice for slave soldiers' ears. You don't march on the cats, not head on. They use the square. This is bringing back John Con. Because the square, we put in there that he learned the square from the company of the cats. And he says, hasn't every soldier heard Red Ripples? This is the song that they mentioned in the John Con chapters. And so the fact that like this other salesman company is like, yeah, of course the cats use the square. Why would you march on them head on? Like, we've all heard Red Ripples. Like, so, but again, there's big history to that. There's big history. As I went over at the John Con chapter, the square did revolutionize medieval warfare and put an end to cavalry. You know, like so. Let's forget this folly. We haven't turned our cloak, have we? Snitch opened his visor and put out his mouth of sour leaf juice. Snatch, choose sour leaf. I must have dropped a 10-stone shit down the latrine. So yeah, that's the bringing back the latrine later. And there he'll stay, none the wiser. All we have to do is follow orders. Which orders? They have gotten all these orders. The Unsullied, they formed up to face the Iron Men at the edge of the sea where that monster roams. All their options, they're back to square one here. And then here we have the end, like we're ending the Victorian story here. Out on the bay, the dragon had landed on the cog. The ship was aflame, sending up a column of smoke into the air and its sailors into the water. Feeling at home amongst the flames, the dragon settled on the deck. Then it clawed right into the hull like a giant bat burrowing into a pomegranate. We know about Chekhov's bacon. It's going for the pork. And we know that Victorian is going to capture it. So, you know, whether you thought it was the horn or the pork, it doesn't matter. This is the end of the Victorian story. We've ended the Barristan story. We're ending the Victorian story here. Well, I guess there's a little more to the Barristan story coming in. But yeah, this is this idea that the dragon will be captured here because it's and we don't need to continue. You know, we'll find Victorian in a different situation when we next find him. Anyway, I've been talking for an hour, so I'll stop it here and we'll finish up next time. Okay, thanks.